his friend.
CBS Mornings, starting at 7. Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative,
Da-da-da-da.
and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
President Biden is kicking off the North American Leaders Summit, meeting one-on-one with Mexico's president.
We want to have order and security at the border and still balance it with the needs of the migrant.
Congressman George Santos is still ducking questions about his past.
I think when you violate House ethics, you should be held accountable.
Roughly 10 documents marked classified were found inside this former office of President Biden right across from the U.S. Capitol.
What's the difference in what President Trump did versus what we now know President Biden did?
Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Nancy Cordes in Washington. Thank you for joining us. President Biden and the leaders of Mexico and Canada are meeting in Mexico City today. The three are set to give a joint press conference soon, and we'll bring you the latest. But for now, we begin with documents that were marked classified that were found at President Biden's former office here in Washington. Attorney General Merrick Garland has assigned the U.S. Attorney in Chicago to review those materials. The president's personal lawyers discovered roughly 10 documents at the Penn Biden Center in Washington shortly before last year's midterm elections. The documents were contained in a folder that was in a box with other unclassified papers. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy called the recovery of those materials from Mr. Biden's time as vice president, quote, very concerning. For more, congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins us now. And Scott, thanks so much for being here at the desk. There have been a number of new developments today. So what can you tell us?
Just the last few minutes, CBS News has confirmed there are roughly 10 documents with a range of classification levels, highly classified included. And perhaps no surprise, the new House Republican majority is pouncing on this, calling for new investigations. We learned a few moments ago the House Oversight Committee, led by James Comer of Kentucky, has formally launched its own investigation into this, requesting documents from the White House, answering for these records, and requesting them by January 24th. It's a short timetable. The House Intelligence
Committee. 2 weeks.
It's 2 weeks, and ultimately, they're going to hold the deadlines firm, they say, on this. They expect them within 2 weeks. Also, the top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee, Michael Turner of Ohio, says he's going to ask the department and the director of national intelligence for a damage assessment of what might have been compromised, what damage might have been incurred by these records being in a Biden-affiliated personal office.
And this is an example of how the president's world has changed now that Republicans control the House. They now, for the first time in his presidency, have the ability to launch investigations into him, into his administration, into his family. And that's exactly what they're doing less than 24 hours after we first learned about these classified documents, when there are still a lot of unanswered questions. I mean, you pointed out that we now know that these documents were of a range of levels of confidentiality, and yet we still don't know what those documents were about.
What strikes me, Nancy, is that it's also just gone to the top of the queue. This is the first thing out of the gates for the House Oversight Committee in terms of a date set, firm deadline, formal announcement of an investigation. They had pledged a whole series of investigations into the Biden administration from the House Oversight Committee, including into the president's son. This now is the first thing out of the gates, and the symmetry between this and what James Comer, the top Republican on the committee, argues is the Mar-a-Lago case is part of what's informing their argument, that there's two styled cases that they want to have investigated similarly. They're making an equivalency there, whether justified or not.
We know that Republicans are drawing those comparisons. What do Democrats have to say today when you were speaking to them in the halls of Congress about this situation?
Let's go back to the same committee, the House Oversight Committee, which seems to be taking the lead on this. The top Democrat on that committee is Jamie Raskin of Maryland, who says his first impression of what he's read of the reporting is that the Biden attorney seemed to move immediately, promptly, and properly once records are discovered. You can see the baseline foundation of their argument that there was a speed with which the Biden team responded to this, a contrast to Mar-a-Lago, where it required an FBI seizure on August 8th, months after the request for the return of the documents began.
Right. Basically, what the White House has said is that the president's lawyers were packing up his office. They found these documents. Immediately, they stopped what they were doing. They contacted the National Archives, and then they, in turn, contacted the Justice Department. Scott, with the time we have left, I want to ask you about another big story on Capitol Hill, and that has to do with the new Republican Congressman George Santos. Just today, you had two New York Democrats announcing that they are going to file a formal complaint with the Ethics Committee in the House. What are they accusing him of, and what are the possible implications here?
Of financial misconduct or campaign finance disclosure misconduct. Those two New York Democrats, Dan Goldman and Richie Torres, delivered their ethics complaint to Congressman Santos's door today. Let's let Dan Goldman explain what he was after when he delivered the complaint today.
Mr. Santos's conduct, both as it relates to his outright lies about his biography, about his employment, about his entire person, his being, his religion. All of that reflects on every one of us in Congress. And what we are asking the Ethics Committee to investigate is very specifically his financial disclosures, which are highly suspicious and seemingly miraculous if they are to be believed.
Santos isn't commenting. I want to tell you, this is not sustainable. There is a press corps of about a dozen cameras outside that office every day. He's not answering questions. Somebody's going to have to relent. I'm just not sure who it's going to be.
Some interesting stagecraft there with his colleagues standing right outside his door as well. All right, Scott MacFarlane, thank you so much. The North American Leaders Summit is coming to an end. During his visit to Mexico City, President Biden met with Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The three leaders discussed a range of issues, including migration, clean energy, and trade. The trilateral meeting is held most years, although there was a hiatus while Donald Trump was president. For more on this meeting, CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us now from Mexico City. Weijia, what can you tell us about the meetings that have taken place between these leaders so far and what we expect to hear from them in just a few minutes in this joint statement?
Well, Nancy, I do think there will be some news whenever Canada and the U.S. announces that Canada has agreed to purchase a U.S. defense system for Ukraine, and that President Biden will make his first trip to Canada since taking office sometime in March. We also expect the three leaders to talk about all those things that you just mentioned, because they had a very lengthy meetings all day. The president also met separately with his Mexican counterpart, as well as Prime Minister Trudeau. And so they will be talking about agreements that they have come to when it comes to working together on migration, on economic competitiveness. For example, they have decided to have a forum on semiconductors because, of course, one reason that they want to come together is to show North American solidarity as well as competitiveness against China, which has been the source of semiconductors for so long. So, Nancy, there is a lot to get to here today. And I have to say, with regard to the meeting between President Biden and President López Obrador last night, it set a bit of a tense backdrop because President López Obrador said essentially that he wants the U.S. to be doing more, that the president has a key in his hand to better the lives of people in Latin America, as well as the Caribbean, without asking for more new investments in dollars. So we'll have to see if they came to any commitments to that. But there certainly is a lot to get to. As you can see behind me, there are three podiums. We are waiting for the three leaders. I just saw Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas here. So things are getting underway. They're running a bit late, but we do expect them to come out momentarily.
Weijia, you referenced that rocky start that this meeting got off to yesterday with some really pointed comments from the Mexican president who's hosting this summit. Right. He said that the U.S. needs to end its attitude of abandonment of Latin America and its disdain for Latin Americans. President Biden, clearly felt the need to clear things up, and he said, well, actually, the U.S. has spent tens of billions of dollars on aid to Latin America over the past 15 years. But what are you hearing from White House officials behind the scenes about why the Mexican president felt he needed to say that in this setting and how they feel about it?
Well, I think given the current climate right now, there's a lot of finger pointing, given the crisis at the southern border, given stigmas that are attached. And actually, one of the things that the three leaders decided on was to curb xenophobia and to help with the discrimination against people from this region. And so I think that, he wanted to be very firm. He is the host of this summit. This is his country. And so one thing, though, that I am interested to find out more about, Nancy, is, that exchange happened in front of the cameras. It happened in front of reporters. So you can only imagine the tension that might have unfolded as these two leaders met in private. Again, it's not necessarily surprising because unlike other relationships that President Biden has, it's not exactly a warm one with President López Obrador, who was very supportive of former President Trump and who actually ditched the America Summit that President Biden hosted in Los Angeles over the summer. And so there's already tension there, and I think that set the stage for even more. But these two countries need each other. They have to work together, and so they will put on a united front when they address the press in just a moment.
So the format for this press conference we're waiting for, and correct me if I'm wrong, Weija, is that each of the leaders, the three leaders, will speak, and then they'll each take one question or a question from one reporter, rather, from each of their home countries. So they're not exactly going to be subjecting themselves to a raft of questions from the reporters who are gathered there. But has President Biden or have White House officials there in Mexico faced any questions yet or responded to any questions yet from reporters about this situation having to do with the classified documents that were found at the Penn Biden Center here in Washington, D.C., we now know, discovered about 2 months ago?
Right. You are right about the format. That means one American journalist will be able to ask questions of President Biden and perhaps the other two leaders as well. And no, he has not responded to, the story that our colleagues broke last night about these classified documents in the Penn Biden Center. And there's no doubt that he will have to. It's just a matter of when, especially given what he has said in the past about the classified documents found at the former president's resort down in Florida. Now, to be clear, these are two very different situations. However, we are still talking about classified documents in both instances. And so, at the time, he was vice president who could not declassify documents. We still don't know exactly how they made their way to his private office. And we don't know, and I think this is important, Nancy, we don't know whether ODNI, the Office of National Intelligence, has already launched or is planning to launch a risk assessment of those documents and what it could mean for national security. So I think the White House, we got their statement in terms of what they are saying. It is very much, that they are working with the National Archives, making the point as often as they can that the president's lawyers self-reported that as soon as they discovered these documents, they decided to turn them in. They didn't have to be asked about this. There was no conflict. And so even though they're not elaborating, again, Nancy, I fully expect an American journalist to ask the president about that when he takes a question.
Well, that'll be interesting to watch, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again after that. Weija Jiang, thank you so much. The Biden documents are already sparking questions on Capitol Hill. Up next, we'll be speaking with House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer about his plans for investigations. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, they are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app. When weather turns extreme,
states from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
Every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Not one more child!
School shootings have parents fighting mad.
I promised my daughter I was going to fight. It's going to keep on happening.
And teachers taking lessons in how to fight back.
This is an exercise.
We approach it as it's you or them.
It shouldn't have to be your teacher's job to protect your life.
But will the battle over gun control,
People are afraid that they're going to lose their gun rights altogether,
be the hardest lesson of all?
The exercise, you're having to shoot at an adult. Are you prepared to have to kill one of your students?
Guns in the Classroom, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Nancy Cordes. CBS News has learned the Republican-led House Committee on Oversight and Accountability has launched an investigation into the documents marked classified that were found at a private office once used by President Joe Biden. In a letter to White House counsel Stuart Dellery, Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer writes that the committee is concerned that President Biden has compromised intelligence sources. Comer asked the White House to turn over all documents and communications related to the classified material found in President Biden's personal office, including the documents themselves, by January 24th. The request does not include a subpoena. Kentucky Republican Congressman James Comer joins us now. He is the new chair of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee for the 118th Congress. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So what is it that you most want to know when it comes to these Biden documents that were marked classified?
We simply want to know the same things we asked when Mar-a-Lago was raided. Who has which documents? What level of classification are we talking about here? How many documents? And what was the process involved with making the decision to raid Mar-a-Lago versus the decision to apparently do nothing with President Biden?
You said earlier that this was an example of a two-tiered system for Democrats and Republicans at the Justice Department. In this case, as soon as the Justice Department found out about it, the Attorney General took it on and, in fact, assigned the investigation to a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney. Did he do something wrong?
Well, that's what you say, but we don't know. This happened November the 2nd. We really don't know what transpired after that. They now come out and say they did all this stuff as a precaution. You know, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. We don't know. That's why we're requesting information. The National Archives never gave us the information we requested when Mar-a-Lago was raided. Now we request similar information with respect to Joe Biden. Look, this happened November 2nd. Joe Biden said he would be the most transparent president in American history. Why are we just now learning this? CBS did a great job uncovering this. or we would never know. So, it appears that it's another cover-up. And we just have a lot of questions with respect to how Biden's been treated versus how Donald Trump was treated.
So do you see your committee, the Oversight Committee, as playing a role in getting to the bottom of what happened here? And if so, are you going to wait until the Justice Department completes its review of these documents and we learn more about what was actually in the documents, or are you going to start investigating right away?
No, we're simply just requesting the same information we requested when Mar-a-Lago was raided. Again, once we get this information and digest it, then we'll go from there. I'm not saying we're going to open a full-scale investigation, but we have questions. I think the American people deserve to know, with respect to the former president's raid, who actually had the authority to trigger a raid of the residence of a former president. I mean, it's unprecedented that a sleepy government agency like the National Archives would have that much authority. Now, we see the same thing happen with Joe Biden, and by the way, we know it's happened with other presidents where they've mistakenly taken documents home, and they weren't in a protective setting, and they weren't even supposed to have those classified documents. But it doesn't appear anything's happened to Joe Biden, and why are we just now learning about this? They're supposed to brief the Republicans on the Oversight Committee when something like this happens because the National Archives is in our jurisdiction.
Mr. Chairman, in the past, you have accused the Justice Department of being weaponized against former President Trump and his allies. But if it is the case, as the Justice Department has said, that this Biden situation was immediately taken under advisement and assigned to a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, does that address some of your concerns and your accusations that somehow Democrats and Republicans are treated differently by the Justice Department?
Well, it may. Again, we want to know exactly what Donald Trump supposedly has. I mean, look, every president has had an issue with taking classified documents. That's something that's very clear, and the evidence is there. Joe Biden was very quick to criticize Donald Trump after the raid, said he acted irresponsibly in having those classified documents, but now we see he did the same thing. Look, mistakes happen, I get it, but other presidents weren't raided. This president wasn't raided, and we're just now finding out about this. This is 2 months later. Why didn't we learn about this at the moment it happened? Was it because it was a week before the election when Joe Biden was making the closing argument with the American people that Republicans were a threat to democracy and citing the raid at Mar-a-Lago? Is that the reason we didn't hear about it then? I mean, I'm very concerned about the flow of information, very concerned that there is a two-tier justice system in the Department of Justice, and that's why we're starting this select committee to investigate whether or not the Department of Justice has been weaponized.
But wasn't the difference in the Trump case that for nearly a year, both the Justice Department and the National Archives tried to negotiate with the former president to get those documents back, all of those documents, and they were unsuccessful?
Yeah, look, I'm not defending the president here. I'm just saying we have a similar situation that happened to Donald Trump versus what we know now happened with Joe Biden, but they were handled completely differently by the Department of Justice. So, I'm not defending Donald Trump. No, under no circumstances should anyone possess documents that are classified that would risk our national security. And I understand that mistakes happen, but my point here is the way the Department of Justice and the FBI has handled this are very different compared to Trump versus Biden.
Right. And it may be that they were handled differently because the situations were themselves quite different. Congressman, in the time we have left, if you could just tell us a little bit about these letters that you had sent to the White House at the end of last year asking for information about Hunter Biden. The response came back from the White House, you're going to have to wait until Republicans officially take control of the House. You now have taken control of the House. You are now the chair of the Oversight Committee. So are you going to resubmit those requests, and what exactly are you looking for?
yes, we're going to submit those requests, but the overwhelming majority of those requests pertain to how tax dollars were spent. We're very concerned that there was a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse with the COVID funds. We're very concerned about how the stimulus funds were spent. We're very concerned. Every day we hear a new report that the FBI created a new agency with 80 employees to police the social media sites when the FBI never had the authority or the budget to do that. So there's been no oversight in this building for the past 2 years. That's going to change today, and we're going to request information because at the end of the day, my committee's responsibility is to determine whether or not there's waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government and to try to prevent that and hold people accountable for wrongdoing. So unfortunately, the administration hasn't worked with us. Hopefully that'll change moving forward.
It'll be very interesting to watch. Congressman James Comer, the chair of the Oversight and Accountability Committee in the House, thank you so much.
Thank you.
A few notable names brought ad space in Iowa this week. We're going to check in on our 2024 campaign watch when Red and Blue comes back. Stay with us.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future.
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women.
What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done?
We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Nancy Cordes. California Congresswoman Katie Porter has announced a bid for Senate in 2024. The Democrat will be campaigning for the seat of 89-year-old Senator Dianne Feinstein, who has not yet said whether she will run for re-election. Porter narrowly defeated Republican Scott Baugh in the November midterms to secure a third term in Congress. In her campaign announcement video, Porter says she is throwing her hat into the ring because California needs a, quote, warrior in Washington to stand up to powerful banking, oil, and pharmaceutical companies. Former President Trump was among some notable Republican faces seen on handouts at an Iowa GOP breakfast yesterday. Republican South Carolina Senator Tim Scott and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also bought space in handouts given to Iowa Republicans for their annual legislative breakfast. Another potential 2024 hopeful, Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, was a speaker at the breakfast. So reading some tea leaves there. The former chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, Alan Weisselberg, has been sentenced to 5 months in jail. The sentence was part of a deal made in August when Weisselberg pled guilty to dodging taxes on nearly $2 million worth of job perks. Those included luxury cars and his grandchildren's private school tuition. The Trump Organization denies sanctioning or even knowing about the fraud. Well, that does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/red and blue.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up.